Hello, and a big warm welcome to the Guardian Doula's Diary podcast. My name is Angela Deuce, or Angie. I'm your host and the founder of Guardian Doula. I'm a certified birth and postpartum doula and childbirth educator based on Sydney's Northern Beaches and serving women and their families all throughout Sydney. This podcast is an honest collection of the stories and experiences of birthing women and the professionals that support them to empower, equip, and inspire us all. Let's get into it. So in this episode, the beautiful Megan talks us through the early weeks of breastfeeding, among other things, but that was kind of the focus. Megan really knows her stuff. So she is an endorsed midwife and an IBCLC working at Northern Beaches Hospital, as well as with Dr Hugh Porter at Sydney Babies. And if that's not enough, she also runs her own private lactation practice, which is called Learn Latch Love. Most importantly, though, she's a mum and she is absolutely beautiful. Enjoy! Do you want to just start off and tell us about yourself?
Where to start? So my name is Megan and I'm a mum and a midwife and a wife and a sister and all of the other things that come with being a woman. And I have been a nurse. I started as a nurse and worked at Westmead Kids and then did my midwifery training as a graduate diploma about 16 or 17 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. I made some of my best friends at the kids' hospital too, but no regrets. Absolutely live and breathe being a midwife. So I've worked all around Sydney. A lot of my time was in Western Sydney because that's where I grew up. And then we moved over to the Northern Beaches 5 years ago. And I've worked at Northern Beaches since then. At the same time, I was doing a bit of quarantine hotel work. So that was a bit fun, meeting some celebrities and doing something different. Yeah. And I qualified as a lactation consultant in 2021. And it was kind of always a goal to be a lactation consultant. That kind of grew, the desire grew inside of me because over the years I just kept seeing more and more women being given really shit advice, kept seeing women walk away from postnatal wards traumatized and doubting themselves and just feeling really terrible about themselves as mothers and insufficient. And that was because of the words that were being used by midwives. It was because of the advice that was being given. It was because people were being told they weren't doing the right thing, even though every midwife they came across gave them different advice. And I just thought, our lactation training in midwifery is so insufficient. It really is the bare minimum. And what you learn a lot of the time is on the job, and it just didn't feel enough. So then I thought, yeah, okay, I'll become a lactation consultant because then I'll know. And gosh, it's like anything. The more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know and just how big that pool of knowledge is out there. So I did that, and then I thought I'd like to also try as best possible to make it kind of attainable to more people to have a good quality private lactation consult. And so I went through and did my master's degree in midwifery, which then led me to becoming an endorsed midwife so that women who were kind of within that first weeks could access a Medicare rebate for the care they have with me, whether that's private, postnatal, an antenatal lactation consult to go through their last kind of experience and talk through what they want this time and what that looks like, or just like some TLC in-home postnatal care. I kind of realized there's also a gap in the postnatal market for our private mums who have a 5-day stay in hospital and then go home. And the next person they see is the early childhood nurse. And a lot of the time, like they're just kind of out there wondering what to do. And so I thought I can fill that gap. And so as much as I love birth, like hardcore birth junkie, and I love working in the birthing suite at the hospital, I love being in people's homes doing postnatal as well, where I don't have to answer buzzers. I don't have to get distracted. I can just give quality TLC when people need it. And so that's me. That's my career side of things. There's a lot of other crazy personal stuff too, but I could talk all night.
I love it. The thing that you were saying just then about, the different opinions and the conflicting advice where one midwife will say one thing and then, you go, oh, okay, so you get this whole feeding strategy in place and you've got your plan, and then the shift changes, and now a different midwife comes with a different opinion, and your whole strategy's different again. And it makes you so anxious as a mum, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
it's exactly what you were saying. People get like traumatized because you go, oh my gosh, like, what
totally.
do I do? What do I not do? Who do I listen to? Who do I not listen to? And it also can sometimes undermine like the mom's confidence and the mom's almost like sense of belief in her own intuition, because you might go, okay, yep, what this midwife says makes sense. I agree with that. I see that that's a thing. Like, yep, I'm going to do that. And then someone else, as you said, like even the language they can use, like, oh no, that's wrong. Or and then you go, oh gosh, yeah, I was so silly for thinking that that was true. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, I'll just readjust my whole thing. And it can be so much back and forth. And I mean, even if you don't have all of those different opinions, it's such an emotional roller coaster. Like when you've just given birth, your hormones are
Totally.
everywhere and you're probably tired. Like already it's so big.
You're
Um,
so sleep deprived. And everything in your being wants to protect that beautiful baby that you've given birth to. Everything inside of you energetically wants to make sure that child is thriving and loved and nurtured. And we're not doing this in villages. We're not doing it with our parents there. We're not doing it with our aunties and our cousins and our friends all living together where we can watch and learn and have people helping us all the time. We're doing it with strangers in a hospital, people who wear scrubs, who we think are experts in this field. And so our instinct is
yes,
to trust them over maybe necessarily what our gut is telling us. And that it's not always ideal. Sometimes it is. We have some of the best midwives on the northern beaches. Like I absolutely love working here. But
yeah,
sometimes people just like they just feel so torn. And so I come from a very down to earth, very free range type of, whatever works for you, forget the rest. Like our mind is a sieve. Take the bits that work, forget the rest. Smile, nod, say thanks very much, and just do
yeah,
whatever works for you. And so that often my kind of approach when I'm doing a lactation consult with someone is first to say, like, take me back. How was your pregnancy? Will you tell me about your birth? And listen to kind of where it all started. And then tell me about that first feed. Tell me about the first few feeds in the hospital. And so then we kind of get to break down like how much of it was instinctive, like was there kind of trouble from the beginning? Where did it all kind of start to go belly up? Or in fact, is everything going okay? And this mum just needs some reassurance that in fact she is more than enough for her baby. And a lot of the time that feels like what I'm doing. It feels like a bit of a rip that I'm going in
yeah,
and saying, actually, your baby's thriving. Look at all these beautiful wet nappies. Look at the baby's gaining weight. You're doing great. But they just need someone to kind of reassure them that they are. So it's
yeah.
pretty
And I
great
mean,
job.
yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful job and it's such an important job. Seriously, every single person that I've worked with, if any like past clients of mine are listening to this, you're probably like they're nodding their heads going, "Yes, oh my gosh." I always harp on and on and on and on about like if you want to breastfeed, get a lactation consultant. Like I cannot emphasize it enough because it's so important. Like what you guys do is so important because of all of the conflicting advice. And I mean, you were touching on before, like the fact that the training that midwives get isn't quite in depth enough, and they do know a lot about breastfeeding. And especially if you're a first time mom, like it's a lot more than probably, especially if you've not done like antenatal breastfeeding
Mm.
education or, but it's still quite limited. And some of the things that midwives are suggesting that mums do or don't do, it might be really outdated information, or it might just be like somewhat accurate, but also just like a little bit, like some of the things I hear, I'm like, oh, so close, like so
And
close.
some of it, like, it can be really well intentioned. If I see one more person who's told they can only feed their baby in the football hold, I probably will have to headbutt a wall. Like, it's
Yes.
not sustainable in the long term to only learn to feed your baby holding them under your arm. Like, it's one, you're going to get sore hands and sore wrists. And it feels like you have to be trapped to a chair to do that. And it's not necessarily kind of trapped to a chair that you're going to have in a cafe where you feel capable and confident to like just whip your breast out to feed your baby. I think we need to ask women, does this feel comfortable? Not just does your nipple hurt, do you feel
Yeah.
comfortable feeding your baby like this? And not all women are going to feel comfortable laying back to feed their baby because that also is kind of trending. Not all women are going to feel good cross cradle. Not like people are going to have different kind of thoughts and feelings, and it can be a great trick to get a baby on the breast that's struggling in other positions. But I think before we kind of say goodbye to a woman from midwifery care, we should make sure that she's got a few kind of positions and techniques and understands the basic concepts are the same with all of them. Just make sure she feels confident with, looking at those techniques so that she can continue to feed her baby in the long term, not just the short term.
Yeah, it's so true. And a lot of women don't even know that there are those different ways of holding the
Mm,
baby and that there are different techniques. Like when I talk about it with my clients, I always am like, you don't have to do, and what you typically see in public is that you will see the kind of cross cradle hold.
mm.
And for anyone listening, that's kind of the one where the baby is like on the breast and then their body, it's like tummy to tummy and their body is across your body. That's the really classic, typical one that you tend to see out in the world and whatever. And you're right, like, I think probably a big reason that you only really see that one is because generally it's more discreet than, like, yeah, lying back, trying to do some of the other
Can't
positions
do
in the
that
foot.
in a cafe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's less comfortable, I think, for the women, like, physically less comfortable, but then also socially, you might feel less comfortable doing that, you know?
Those mums at school picking up their kindergarteners with a newborn and trying to sit in the playground on a bench holding their baby under their arm to feed them, like, just for 40 minutes or whatever it's taking that baby to feed. Like, I just can't imagine that being your only option is is very fun.
Yeah, you gotta have a few ways
Mm.
that you can kind of do it, and I think having a lactation consultant sit with you, like you were talking about, having that one-on-one, like, proper private TLC, where they are sitting with you, they're watching the baby feed, like, it's honestly priceless. I think I don't know where I would be without lactation consultants. And there's also this misconception really often that, like, if you've breastfed a baby before, you're all good, you're on your merry way, like, oh, you've done it before, you'll be fine. But every baby is so different. And you also forget, like, oh my gosh, there's also baby brain that's part of this, and like sleep deprivation and all the things. So it's like, just because you've done it before doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be this expert. Like, even the fourth time around, like, I mean, I loved your Instagram post the other day. I commented being like, oh my gosh, Joe was so helpful at the hospital. Like, I was on my fourth baby and I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, you know? And like
She's a
what you
doll.
mentioned before is so true. Like, you probably do know, but you need that reassurance. And it's like, you just need to be told, like, yep, that looks great. Or, like, it's
Yeah.
really
I
very true.
I think as well, sometimes like our muscle memory is us feeding a 1-year-old who is very different to feeding a newborn baby. And sometimes we forget how much support that they actually need, like how much hands-on support a newborn can need to stay at the breast. And so sometimes we've got these much bigger babies who can sit on our lap and essentially pull our bra down and feed themselves. But when we've got a newborn, something I see a lot with mums who fed babies before is they're like, my nipples are really hurting, it's really sore, they're really hungry, they're falling off. And then when we kind of look at it, these babies are dragging on the breast. They're not getting enough support to hold the baby in close to their chest. And so that drag on their areola is creating more strain than that breast wants or needs. And so that's kind of giving that wear and tear type of pain. Nothing wrong with the baby's mouth, nothing wrong with the baby's mum's nipples. There's nothing physically wrong with either of them. A simple, like, little structured support kind of lie back with the baby so gravity will hold them to your chest a little bit, or be more proactive in holding them nice and close, and then, like, bang, pain's gone. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's
So,
crazy.
yeah, sometimes we kind of forget that some babies can't just be scooped up in an arm and held near the breast and it all works magically. Some of them need a little bit more guidance than that.
And those little tiny tweaks do make such a huge difference. It's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. A lot of the time, us coming into your home and having, like, I like to do visits at home with people on their couch or their bed and like using the resources they've got around them. I'm never going to tell you to go and buy a fancy pillow or like contraptions because I think most of the time we don't need any of that stuff. But kind of seeing you in the comfort of your own home and working with that and making those little tiny tweaks can often make such a big difference. And it just feels like I wish everyone knew these things. I wish someone could have told you this when they did your home visit or when you were in the hospital. Like just move your hand here a little bit, change this position, and then bang. But if that's what it does to change their breastfeeding journey so they're more comfortable and happy and thriving, then great, amazing. I'm happy with to just come and do little tweaks.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's huge. I also loved what you were saying before about how your mind is a sieve. That is so cool. It's such a good way of looking at it because it's really true.
Mm.
Like you do have to kind of filter what you hear and then yeah, like you described, kind of take the things that are helpful and that are working and then just leave the stuff that's not.
Yeah, but with no guilt. Like you don't owe anyone anything. There's no like scorecard to get out of, motherhood without feeling, I don't know, damaged or, like you're not good enough or whatever. Like really you're not going to upset anyone. And if you do, that's their problem. It's not yours. What you need
Yeah.
to do is use the resources around you. Like I will see thousands of women every year in the hospital or the clinic or do my private practice. I'm going to have thousands of different tips and tools and tricks that could work in your particular situation. Not every one of them is going to work for every woman. And so try it, you like it, you don't, get rid of it. And then all the other midwives will be the same. They'll all have something to contribute. And it's just about figuring out what works for you and your particular baby. We can't all vibe with every healthcare worker we come across. So it's just about
Yeah.
like, letting it all be part of the journey if they're not for you or their advice is not for you. And
Yeah.
also, if you don't get the advice that feels right or works for you, keep seeking help. Like, just
Yes.
keep, like, ask around, like, do some research. There's a lot of people. I don't do very much telehealth, but by all means, I would be so happy to do it for someone if, distance was an issue and they wanted to get some advice. Absolutely. It's just about kind of finding the people that fit in with, what you want as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I say that to people as well when they're looking for a doula. Like everyone needs a different way and a different approach. And, like some doulas might be really, really good at tough love, and then maybe others are a little bit more gentle and a little bit softer. And different people need different just different approaches, and it's the same thing for lactation consultants and midwives and
Yeah.
um yeah, we're all so unique, and I love what you were saying too about like not feeling guilty if you don't necessarily love what
Mm.
somebody's input has been. Like it's okay to be like, oh, you know what, I might just leave that. Like it doesn't mean that you are like disrespecting them or that you don't appreciate what they were offering you. Like it's okay to kind of not take everything on.
Yeah. We leave the good girl outside the hospital and you come in.
Yes.
Yeah, like, you don't need to say yes to everyone. You don't need to apologize for anything. You don't like, you just come in and yeah, obviously, we can all be respectful towards each other, but it doesn't mean you have to try and please other people. Like, your
Yeah.
job is to look after yourself, number 1, and nurture that baby, and if both of you are, like, loved and nurtured, then everything else falls into place.
It's so true. It's so true. I feel like I wish that everyone believed that and would, because I feel like we know it as mums, and we know that like if we are okay and we're healthy and we're thriving, then so is our baby and our other children. But we sometimes don't give ourselves like complete permission um for that to be true. Like we almost
Mhm.
self-sacrifice a lot, and it's to an extent like we have to, we're constantly making sacrifices for our babies and for our children. Like that's part of being a parent, is that you do put their needs above yours all the time. Like I'm
Mhm.
sure no mom of a newborn feels like waking up every few hours at night. You don't want to do it. Like that's a sacrifice, but there is a very important balance that needs to happen where you are looking after yourself
Absolutely.
and doing all of that.
Absolutely. And that you feel loved, that you feel like cared about. It's such a powerful thing at this time. I feel like we're so vulnerable. We're cracked open when we give birth to our babies, and like the feelings are big, the sad feelings, the happy feelings, the baby blues. Like I think that is on purpose. It's nature's way of making us, one, protective of our babies, and two, it makes us able to fall so deeply in love with them. And but I think at the same time, because we're so open to all of the feelings, we need to feel loved at the same time. And I think a lot of midwifery is love, whether you like it or not, call it what you will. The act of caring for someone so deeply and being with them, like sharing something so personal, being there for the hugs and the tears and all the rest of it, like to care about people in such a way, I really feel like it comes from a place of love. And so I think I would
True.
really hope that every woman after they have their baby, whether it's family, friends, their doula, their healthcare team, like they feel like they were loved and nurtured as they entered motherhood. I can only hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I mean, you even mentioned a few minutes ago about how most of the midwives are so beautiful. I think it's really rare to come across a midwife who hates what she does and like doesn't care. Like, I
Mm.
feel like that's not, you know, it's, yeah, certainly the
They,
vast
they
majority
definitely exist. They exist,
they do, but
but
it's
I
rare,
like
isn't
I
it?
totally. I haven't seen one in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't stay in a job like this unless you get something out of it. But midwives are not in this for the money.
Oh,
In
yeah.
it for the wonderful hours and the perks because they don't exist. They
Yeah.
in it because they get so much satisfaction from like helping women and guiding women through what is such a vulnerable time in our lives. Like we get what you get back from that is your reward. Like I still like to
Yeah.
get paid, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's a
Still have to pay the
really
bills.
totally by the Weet Beaks, it's a really
Yeah.
rewarding job for sure.
Oh, it's so cool. It's so
It
cool.
really is. It's the best job in the world. I don't know many people who, 20 years into a career love their job more now than when they started. And to start with, I like I said, I'm a birth junkie like most midwives. Like we love just seeing that moment that a baby's born. It's incredible. And I remember
Yeah.
being like a young kind of baby midwife in my early 20s and just loving that Disney moment that, I'd get to know a couple and bond with them and get to like see who they were as a couple. And then I'd see this baby born and everything in the room changed. All of a sudden, they went from a couple to a mum and a dad, and you could just feel the air was different. And I loved that magical moment. And then with time and probably having my own babies, I really, my perspective has shifted. That really, my obsession with birth is seeing a woman on the day where she really finds herself. Like she realizes her true strength, her true power, and she's kind of like cracked open this whole new person, and she has this total change in belief in herself. Like to see that transformation in her as she becomes a mother is next level amazing. Like to see how proud someone can be at the end of a birth, to just see how instinctive they are as they pick up their baby and begin to nurture. It's incredible. It's so good. So good.
It's seriously amazing. I couldn't agree more. Like, and it's everything that you were saying, like that, yeah, that Disney moment that you described where you're like, oh, this is so beautiful and so special. And it's like this fairy tale moment seeing, couples become families and that stuff. But then also the sheer like the craziness of a woman like finding out how strong she really is. And like I always say, I feel like we almost do women a disservice when we try and like rescue them from the intensity of birth and the pain. Like I
Mm.
know a lot of people don't like to use that word, but I'm just like, call it what it is. Like it's painful.
Oh,
It
it's
is.
painful. It's so
It's
painful.
painful. It's painful. And if you want to call it intensity or whatever, like you can do that. But I think we sugarcoat it and it doesn't do anyone any favors. But seeing
No,
women,
absolutely.
go through that and then realize that they were actually so much stronger than they ever thought. Like if we just believe in them and give them amazing support, and we give them the tools and all the things that they need to just go through birth and not try and get around it and not try and go over it or under it. And it's not to say that it's like bad if you don't want to feel everything, like that's okay too. If that's just your preference, that's fine. But I think it's really beautiful to see what happens for women when they do kind of surprise themselves, and they go through birth and they do it and they go, oh my gosh, I am so much stronger than I ever thought. And then they take that newfound confidence into parenthood. And I really can say that I've noticed a difference, like in the women that I've worked with and just in my friends and in myself as well. Like when you just do it and you give birth and you go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I just did that. Like the feeling inside of yourself, and something just happens to your brain. Like something happens and you
Totally
go, oh
does.
my gosh.
Rewired.
Yeah.
It does. Someone asked me actually today, like, do you plan on having any more babies? And I was like, absolutely not. Like I don't love being pregnant, but you know what? I would give birth to 100 babies if I didn't have to be pregnant. Like I
Wow,
just
that's so
that
funny.
that
That's so
yeah,
good.
the physical satisfaction of that baby leaving your body, like absolutely incredible. It's amazing. But goodness me, pregnancy is hard work.
I feel like so many women are the opposite, where they're like, oh, I love
Mm,
being pregnant, love it, love it,
mm,
love it. But then giving birth, they're like, no, don't want to do that. So it's really
yeah,
interesting to hear you're so the opposite. Like you didn't love pregnancy, but then you're like, I'll give birth to
yeah.
anyone's baby. Hand them over, I'll
Oh
give
my
birth
gosh,
to them.
absolutely. I'd like just to be able to experience that again. It's such an unreal physical experience to go through, and like it changes everything inside of you forever. And it makes us total badasses. Like, tell me one woman who has gone through like a natural labor and birth who doesn't think they could fight a bear afterwards. Like,
Yeah, I
bring
can't
it.
tell you
Great, I could
one.
do that. Yeah.
Yep. I could fight 10
It
bears.
yeah, bring him. Just throw me into the forest. I'll be fine.
Oh,
Yes, it does.
100%.
Yeah, it's an incredible physical thing to go through, and I do love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you had to pick like your favorite thing about being a midwife and then your favorite thing about being an IBCLC, what would you say those
Mm.
would be? I know that's such a hard question.
It is. There's something really special about being invited into somebody's space. Like whether they actually choose you as their midwife or not, people still have to kind of let you in. I think that people you have to be able to offer something where they're willing to emotionally let you in,
Yeah.
midwife, and I think when you do, kind of when someone lets you into that special space and you share such a significant life moment with them, like women remember how they're treated when they give birth to their babies for the rest of their life. Ask a grandma about their birth and they'll tell you if they were nurtured or if someone was mean to them. And so I think to be in a position where you can be that person for someone, it's amazing.
Yeah.
As a nurse, like I was still a nursing student at university and doing shifts in the hospital in like the geriatric wards. And so we went around and we did all of the washes and helped people to eat and got them to the toilet. And I remember the first time that I had to prepare a deceased body for the mortuary, like that had passed on the night shift. And like the nurses kind of said, have you ever done that before? And I went, No, but I've never seen a dead person before. And they're like, oh, that's all right. The ward
Wow.
orderly does it all the time. Like he'll talk you through it. And I was like, and he was great. He was the most amazing human. And I was like, okay, I have faith in him. Like, we can do this. This is part of the job. I've got to do it. And so we did
Yeah.
it together. And I remember going home and reflecting with my mum. So my mum was the most incredible nurse. She had a 42-year career at the same hospital, and she was just adored by
Wow.
everybody. Yeah, amazing. And I kind of everyone around her always went to her for help. Like she just was the most nurturing person, but all of the family, all of the friends, all of the work colleagues, everyone would always come to her and so kind of idolized her a bit growing up. And I remember coming home and telling her about, I had to get someone ready to go to the mortuary and, her asking about my experience. And then her like very seriously saying, Megan, in this kind of work, you have to understand that you're going to be with people for their very first breath and for their very last. And whichever end of the spectrum you're at, it is an incredibly privileged position, and you must never take that for granted. And I think it really stuck
Yeah.
with me as like a 17, 18-year-old, and just kind of was like, yeah, like she's right. Like this is the portal of time and space, and whatever is on the other side, like we get to be that person with someone. And so I do really kind of take it seriously in the most unserious
Yeah.
of ways sometimes. Sometimes you've got to be a
Yeah.
joker and, lighten the mood and have a dance and a wiggle and be the person that someone needs. But I think it's just really incredible to be such a stranger in someone's life that then their memory of you stays with them forever. Like that's amazing.
Mm, mm.
And then I suppose as a lactation consultant, sometimes it feels like you're picking up the pieces a little bit and rebuilding.
Yeah.
Um, I think if someone comes to you for feeding support, very rarely is it ever just a check-in. Like everything's going great, I just want to check in. Like often by the time someone is investing money in a private lactation consultant, they're like really struggling. And so sometimes that work does feel like you're kind of rebuilding that mum, and helping her to get back on her feet so that she can continue to thrive, and then her baby can thrive because of that. So, it feels a much more fragile kind of position, but it still feels like one of privilege where we can go in and be that person that kind of shows them the way a little bit and shows them like how well they're doing or what we can do to help them. Or be the person that says it's okay if you don't want to do this. It's okay. You don't need to feel guilty. You just need to be honest, like honest with yourself and honest with me. And sometimes being a health professional that says it's okay, you don't have to do this, gives people the
Yeah.
inner permission they need to make that decision. So
Yeah.
either way, I'm there for it.
Yeah. Oh, it honestly sounds like both of the things that you love the most about what you do, like what you love about midwifery and what you love about being a lactation consultant, is just being with people in such significant moments. Like, and I feel like I would say the exact same thing about what I love about
Mm,
being a doula. Like, it is such an honor. Like what you were saying before about just, never forgetting the privilege that that is. I think it's so important. And sometimes you do feel a little bit like the midwife or whoever, it's just another day at work for them, and it's maybe, it's not that special. Um, which is unfortunate because for you giving birth, or, for whoever's giving birth, like, it's so not just another day. It's a
mm,
huge deal, and it's true what you mentioned about, if you go ask any granny on the side of the road, like, "Tell me about your birth," they will tell you and they will remember. And it's not true that birth is this one day thing that, it comes and goes and you never think about it. And, oh, as long as the baby's healthy, like, it's not true. You can have a healthy, beautiful baby and really have a lot to unpack and a lot of trauma, and from the birth itself, but also from the postpartum, whether, that's because feeding was hard or
mm.
whether whatever, it can be all sorts of things. Like, I think, yeah, having a place in people's journey, and getting to be that person who is nurturing, and is kind to them and is sensitive, and um yeah, it's such an honor. It really
That's
is.
plus the baby cuddles are so good. I did a
Yeah.
joint visit with an osteopath, for a kind of client that we both knew, and asked her, "Is it okay if we do this
Ooh,
together?" Yeah, it was really great, and so I snuggled this baby at the end of this session, which mum was most happy for me to do, and as we all chatted about kind of follow-up and stuff like that, and when I got home, I could still smell this beautiful newborn on me, and I just thought, "Oh my god, this is exactly what people wanna bottle." Like, it smells so good.
yes,
They're so
that
they're
smell.
so magical. They're so soft and silky, and their little breaths, their little oh my god, they're just so good, and so, I'm pretty lucky that most of the time I'll get to have I would never ask, but if a parent offers and says, "Oh, will you hold my baby or do you wanna cuddle?" I'm like, "Yes, yes, 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 100 times yes."
Oh my gosh, I'm the same. I feel like, yeah, I don't want to ask because I'm like, probably everyone's asking you, all the
Yeah,
aunties and all the family are like, can I
yeah,
hold the baby? And sometimes
yeah,
you do get a bit like, no one take my baby from me. Like, enough.
yeah,
It's my
yeah,
baby.
absolutely.
But yeah, never say no. Hey, when someone offers you a
Oh
cuddle,
my
you're
god,
like,
never. I'm like
yeah,
100% yes, 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 yes.
so beautiful. Oh,
It is,
so
it really
nice.
is. Mm,
So, so nice. I feel like it would be really good to chat about those first few days and weeks of breastfeeding, because I
mm.
think there's so much that happens that you just don't know about when you're going into it, or lots of different misconceptions and stuff. Um, do you want to like walk everyone through a little bit about what to expect, kind of in the first few days and in the first few weeks?
Soon after a baby is born, often they kind of need to just recover for a tiny little minute, and they're ideally skin to skin with their mum, up near her chest. And our bodies adapt after birth to keep our chest warm so that our baby will stay warm because that's where they're meant to be. So having a baby at the chest, and what they'll do is baby has very instinctive motions. Often they'll start rubbing their hands all over breasts. They'll rub some of the amniotic fluid all over mum. They'll pinch, they'll grab, they spit, they lick, they do all sorts of fun things. And then they start to thrash their head around looking for a breast, and it's called their rooting reflex. And so as they start to look, you'll kind of feel guided by yourself as to how much you need to help them, but ideally we don't help them too much. We want them to be able to look and find. Very few babies I've ever seen just get positioned near a breast and latch straight away. Often there's lots of kind of thrashing about, moving about and licking and on off before they actually grasp onto the breast.
Yeah,
Ideally, they'll kind of do it within the first 2 hours of being born, because around that 2-hour mark, most babies will get sleepy, and you can't force feed breastfeeding babies. So if they're sleepy, they're not going to latch and feed. So ideally, a
yeah,
feed in that first couple of hours. And then generally within the first 24 hours of a baby being born, they tend to kind of be like these unicorn babies. Everyone tells you that they're going to be unsettled and they're going to cry a lot. And then often that first day, they're just really beautiful, and they'll feed and they'll fall asleep, and they'll probably even let you put them down in a cot or bassinet, and
yeah.
stay there. And everyone's like, "Oh, I didn't get one of those babies." And you're like, in the most gentle way possible, "That's not today.
Yes,
That's tomorrow and the next day." And so
yes,
you both often like you're all kind of on a high. It can be really hard to sleep even if you've had a 36-hour labor because there's so much adrenaline pumping through you and you just sit and stare at this baby. And so they'll normally kind of feed around, if we had to pick an average, about 6 times. Now, some kind of healthcare facilities will have a minimum of 3 times in 24 hours, and others will have 6 or 8 that they want to try and enforce. So we know there's a big range of what's normal for newborns. It's not normal to leave them for 12 hours. Like, if we think about sustaining the human race, like, that's
yeah,
really not sustainable for babies to not feed for hours on end. But we do know is that a full-term baby, a healthy full-term baby is born with brown fat on them that's really easy for them to burn to maintain their normal blood sugar level. So even though the amount of colostrum getting to them is small in that first few days, even if it's not quite enough, normally babies are totally fine because they start to burn through some of that brown fat that they've put on in the last 4 weeks. It kind of sustains them, and that's where they'll lose some of that birth weight in that first 5 days, for 5 to 7 days. So, yeah, so that first, how we say babies
wow.
can lose up to 10% of their birth weight comes, some of it will come from fluid, some of it will come from them weeing, and any fluids women are given at birth, but a lot of it will come from burning that brown fat that they need to sustain
Wow.
the normal blood sugar levels. Yeah. And so, but on the second day or the second 24 hours, they realize that we've cut the cord. Even if you have a lotus birth, they realize they're not attached to their mother anymore. And they're really quite unimpressed with that. And so they want to be on mum all the time. They'll want
Yeah.
lots of cuddles, they want lots of feeding, they'll wake up and they'll start to do a bit of pooing. They might have done 1 or 2 the day before, and as they're pushing more of the poo out, their tummy's grumbling, they're not so used to that, so they're gonna want more feeding, and so it's quite normal that babies will feed 12 plus times in that 2nd and 3rd day, and quite normal that they'll group those feeds together in cluster feeding. So just like you would cluster anything, a feed, the baby falls asleep, you think, great, they're asleep, I'm going to put you down. And then 10 minutes later, they're awake and there's nothing else that will settle them except putting them to the breast. And they'll feed like they haven't fed in 4 hours. And that
Yeah.
can kind of happen over and over and over again for hours at a time. But that kind of continuous stimulation of the breast and the suckling and the cluster feeding, all of that triggers your milk supply to increase. So we say, a lot of people call it milk coming in, but the milk is already there. It doesn't need to come from anywhere. It's just transitioning from colostrum to mature milk. So it's changing in that time period, which for most women will happen on about the 3rd or 4th day. And so all of that skin to skin contact, all of the cluster feeding, all of that demand feeding and the cuddles and all of that is going to help for that milk supply to really increase, which of course then will satisfy the baby a little bit more, and you might get a little bit more time, or at least a baby that's a little bit more settled between the feeds. But a newborn baby feeding like 8 to 12 times per day is totally normal, even more than that. Like, none of us would feed exactly the same amount, volume, or food every single time we eat or drink. And so there'll
Yeah.
be times a baby comes to the breast because, they're feeling thirsty or they're hungry. Or you know what? The most incredible thing that I like to remind families is that breastfeeding is not just calories and hydration. A
Yeah.
baby coming to your breast is them downloading. So they'll drop their stress hormones, or their cortisol will reduce when they're at the breast suckling. So this big world is massive and overstimulating and a little bit scary for them. There's going to be people doing procedures and tests on them. There's going to be people handling them. There's going to be different smells in people's clothes and laundry,
Yeah.
and the flowers, different voices they've never heard before. Like, there's a lot happening, and so when they come back to the breast, it's like they're coming home, and that's a
So
really beautiful
nice.
thing. It's so nice, and it's so nice
So
that women
nice.
have the power to do that for their babies. And so I
Yeah.
think we need to remember that as well. So if a baby has to come to the breast 16 times in a day, well, that's fine. That's fine. As long as mummy's okay with that, and as long as that baby is thriving and getting like the nappy output that they need, then who cares? You
Yeah.
can't kind of expect that babies will do much in the way of big blocks of sleep. And so when we say 8 feeds in a day, very rarely will you get a baby that feeds, at 10 and then at 1 and then at 4 and then at 7, like exactly on the 3 hours. Sometimes there'll be 2-hour gaps, 4-hour gaps, like it's going to change. And I think one of the kind of big misconceptions when I talk to people, how often is your baby feeding? Often they'll say, oh, every like 2 hours. And I'm like, okay, so that looks like a baby that starts feeding at 12 and then at 2 and then at 4. And they go, no, no, no. From when I finish the feed until when I start the next one, or the sleeping
Yes.
time. And I'm like, no, no. When we break it down, that baby's feeding every 3 hours because we go start of one feed to the start of the next feed, not what the gap is in between them.
Yeah.
And that kind
That's a
of often
huge,
is, yeah, it's a shock,
yeah.
right? Because often people think, okay, I can get 3 hours sleep in between feeding this baby, but often it's like, 45 minutes, an hour worth of feeding and nappies, and then cuddling and settling. And then there's an hour and a half kind of gap between. And that's great if you get that much between when they're
Yeah.
asking again. And often that looks like you going, oh, I'm going to have a cup of tea and then I lie down. And by the time you've had the cup of tea, 40 minutes later, they wake up. And it can feel really overwhelming, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
fatiguing. And when you back that onto labor, like for some people, like I said, they've had a marathon labor and then they're going into like sleep deprivation zone, the hormones can be really wild and make you
Oh,
feel
yeah.
the feelings really big.
Yeah.
also think that it's really unfair when women get told that breastfeeding shouldn't be painful. Like, by all means, I don't want breastfeeding to be painful for anyone, but I don't know many people that have had anything pulling on their nipples or areolas for, upwards of 8+ hours in the day. And
And
it's
that doesn't
erogenous
feel like
tissue.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course
Yeah, like
that's enough,
how can it
especially when
not
you're not
feel a
used to
bit
it.
sensitive? So I think just understanding like what is sensitive, like what feels a bit wear and tear versus when is damage actually happening or when is this kind of heading into we should be concerned territory. I think there's like a clear distinction then. So I think people don't need to feel bad or guilty if they're kind of feeling a bit worn on the breasts after 3 or 4 days, especially after the cluster feeding. I think as long as we're kind of making sure there's not actual damage happening, that it's improving once the baby's latched and sucking, that that kind of discomfort goes away, and that we don't think that there's any magic potion that can fix nipple pain, because there's
Yeah,
not. There's not.
yeah.
We just need to make sure that we're feeding our baby well and that latch is good, and then the kind of pain or the discomfort should really get better and go away.
I love what you were saying about that it's like, it's going to feel tender. Like that's okay and that's
Mm,
normal and it doesn't mean that you're doing it all wrong and that you can't do it
mm,
and you haven't worked it out. Like you're so right, it does feel tender. Like you haven't it's even if you've been breastfeeding before, it's different and it's more frequent and like it makes total sense that that's going to feel like something. And
mm.
it's true,
Yeah,
it is like almost misleading to be like, oh no, it shouldn't hurt. Like, yes, you don't want to be in tears, like curling your
yeah.
toes up and it's like excruciating, but it's going to
Well,
feel like something.
it automatically sends out like, what am I doing wrong? Because this is uncomfortable for me. Maybe you're not. Maybe this is actually just normal and part of the adjusting. But hey, like let's have a look and talk through what does your nipple look like when the baby comes off the breast? If you're feeling a bit of discomfort um, during the feed and the baby comes off the breast and your nipple looks like a brand new Revlon lipstick, well, we
Yeah,
probably need to be doing a bit more here because the baby
yeah,
probably did have a shallow latch and has been pinching your nipple, and that's what's caused your pain. But if we've got a feed that's going well and nipples that look completely fine and the baby comes off and they're just round and elongated, the mum's like, oh yeah, it was just really uncomfortable for the first 30 seconds as the baby's drawing the nipple towards the back of the throat, and then it was fine. Well, that's normal. That's okay. As
yeah,
long as that doesn't kind of progressively get any worse, then that's okay. It's just a bit of tenderness. And so I
yeah.
think kind of talking to people, talking to your midwife or your lactation consultant or whatever, and just kind of checking in, because it really does break my heart that often women will ask for help, they get help with a feed, and then they'll say, it's hurting, it's hurting. And the healthcare professional says, yeah, it looks like a great latch. The baby's got like a wide open mouth. If that mum is saying it's hurting, and
Then it's
even if it looks
hurting.
good from the outside, something is not right there. We need to do some more
Yeah,
investigating. So
yeah,
it's not a matter of just saying, suck it up. It's
yeah,
a matter of like kind of figuring out what is normal and what isn't.
yeah, yeah,
And so then that, like, generally once the milk supply is well established, which, a lot of people kind of say happens around day 3, day 4, and then over that first 2 or 3 weeks, they're really building a good supply. It can take that long to kind of really nut it out, because sometimes all the stimulation at the breast in that first few days can kind of lead to sometimes a bit too much milk or a bit of swelling and engorgement that really is very uncomfortable. So sometimes people wake up one morning and think, these aren't my breasts. Like, whose
yeah.
are they? How many of us have gone to our partner and go, oh my God, feel my boobs?
I know. You're like, take a
And
photo. This is crazy.
and they're like, yeah, okay, sure. And so, that really uncomfortable feeling. But you know what? It's not always that these breasts are full of milk. Sometimes it's swelling, and that can make it harder for the milk to get out. And
Yeah,
sometimes we've had babies who are breastfeeding beautifully until the milk kind of is well established. And then we've got these big, hard, swollen breasts, and babies who are struggling, latches that become shallow, nipples that get grazed. And it's all about kind of working with the strategies there to kind of reduce the swelling and make sure that the baby can still latch and, helping mums with those kind of things too. Generally, I find by the time they're 2 or 3 weeks old, if they're back to their birth weight, good nappies, mum's feeling pretty confident, nipples are healed if there's been any damage, then I feel like we're well established. But it can take, 2 or 3 weeks to really, and then even still, by the time a baby can be, we can be 6 to 12 weeks before we've really kind of controlled the supply. Some people who have an oversupply will still be at 3 months before the hormones have kind of settled a bit, and the supply will kind of drop down to what the baby is demanding. So, it can take up to 3 months. But if I had someone who had a low supply, I would be doing everything possible within that first 3 weeks to really build it up as much as possible, like doing all of the tricks then.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it is, I mean, yeah, we're gonna talk about misconceptions in a second. This is like the most perfect little bridging thing. It is it is such a misconception, that you just work it out straight away and that your body just, like, does it and it's really quick, because it's not always the case. I mean, yeah, like you said, like, it can take weeks and weeks and weeks for your body to kind of figure out how much your baby needs and wants, and that also is is changing, as your baby's needs change, and your body's so clever. Your body's so clever. It is working so hard to feed that baby, and um yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
And I think sometimes all of the things that we do, especially with our first baby, when we're so keen to kind of master everything so quickly, sometimes the
Yeah.
things that we do and, expressing and catching milk and, using devices and doing all sorts of things because we think there's something wrong or we just want to make everything perfect, that can interfere and cause just as much hassle as help. And
Yes.
so, like I think with our generation, I think really loves the metrics. If I could say breastfeed your baby for 20 minutes, every 3 hours, and that's all you had to do, your baby will be totally fine on that. I think we'd have a lot more people breastfeeding. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the unknown in the volume and the quantity, how do I know it's enough? My baby
Yeah.
doesn't sleep very well. Maybe it's because, I've not got enough milk. And even though that baby can be gaining weight and thriving and doing all of the normal baby things and having great nappies, sometimes it's really hard to convince people that they've got enough milk because they think that there's a reason that their baby's behaving like a baby and not sleeping very well, or that
Yeah.
it's not normal to have to feed my baby 10 times a day because you'll have
Yeah.
someone asking, "Are you feeding that baby again? Oh my gosh, like really? Do you think there's enough milk there? Why would you have to feed the baby so often?" That kind of thing. When in fact it's biologically normal to feed our
Yeah.
baby so often.
Yeah, those comments really throw you off sometimes because you go, "Oh gosh, like, is something wrong? Is this normal?" And it's what you were saying before, like, it's well-meaning people, It's I don't think it's
Mm,
ever, like, usually it really is from a place of love and from a place of
yeah,
care and concern, but man, people say the most unhelpful things.
totally.
It's so hard,
And once
but
the
your
seed
mind
is
is a sieve.
planted, oh, it's a sieve. You can just go, "My baby's fine. It's growing and thriving. We're great." And you know what? Once we accept as well, I think that's the thing. When we realize that breastfeeding is not just nutrition, that there's a lot more to it, it makes it easier to do all of those little tiny extra feeds and be needed a bit more because it's not just about getting milk into the baby, it's about connection.
Yeah,
And
so true.
that's
It makes you feel
really
like
like,
there's more purpose.
oh, totally. It's long-term beneficial to both of you to have those moments of connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Do you wanna tell us any other misconceptions that you hear, or, like, your favorite,
Oh.
worst, most awful misconception that you're like, "We are debunking this right now."
There's a hospital locally that, I've had lots of women get told that they should be pumping on day 1 to help bring their milk supply in. It's absolutely driving me batty. Like,
That's so
if
bizarre,
your
like, that baby's That baby's constantly,
Your
yeah,
baby will do what it needs to do. If you've got a healthy baby that is like alert and active and waking up for feeding, demand feed that baby, and the baby will do the work of bringing the milk in. We don't need to tell your breast that there's two babies to feed when there's one, because in 3 or 4 days, that's going to get pretty messy.
yeah,
That's probably one of them. We don't need to be pumping or doing anything extra to bring the milk in. Um, what else is there? There's a lot of different tools and tricks. I think there's a lot of people who still to this day, even though there's so much out there, that think I've got small breasts, so I won't make much milk, which is really
yes,
hard because the size of your breast does not equate to how much milk you'll make. And
yeah,
neither does how much milk you can or how much colostrum you can express antenatally, because that's really
yes,
trending right now. It's really trending this like 2024 year of antenatal expressing. And so, one, it's not a compulsory thing. Like, this is not a have to do thing. Nobody did this 15 years ago. This is like, it's becoming more and more because there's some research to show it being beneficial to women who have gestational diabetes. So, if you have gestational diabetes, we know that these babies are more likely to have hypoglycemia or low blood sugar in the first few days after birth. And the treatment for hypoglycemia in babies is to feed them. Sometimes we give them some glucose gel as well, but to feed them. And so if we have to express to give the baby milk, um, and wait 20, 30 minutes to be able to get that milk, we're kind of delaying the treatment of that hypoglycemia. So if you express some of your colostrum antenatally and you freeze it and you bring it to the hospital with you, then if your baby has low blood sugar level, we can just warm that up and give your baby your milk instead of a cow's milk based formula or donor human milk. So definitely it's researched and there's benefit there. And I think there's more babies than just the diabetics who are at risk of hypoglycemia. So babies
yeah,
who are like over 4.5 kilos, the growth restricted babies, our prems, but we don't really want you expressing preterm because it can trigger contractions.
yeah,
Mums who are on labetalol, so a blood pressure medication, or an SSRI for their anxiety, like their babies are also at risk of hypoglycemia. And so at beaches, we recommend checking their blood sugar level in the first 24 hours to make sure that we're not missing a baby with low sugar. So in any of those circumstances, I would say, yeah, absolutely, antenatally express. But if you do that and all you get is a glisten of milk on your nipple, it does
don't
not
panic.
reflect how much milk you're gonna make, because really our
Yeah,
body isn't meant to release much milk until the placenta leaves our body. There's hormones in that placenta that say the placenta's nourishing the baby, and then when the placenta leaves, our body detects that hormone's gone and says, "Placenta's out, it's time for the breast to nourish the baby." And so
yeah,
if you don't get much there, please don't, like, be disheartened and think, "I'm not gonna be able to feed my baby," because that's not true.
yeah. I love it. I've heard all of
Mm,
those. Every single one of those, I'm
mm.
like, "Yep, yep, 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 yep."
Have
And
you heard
what do
any
you
others?
think? Oh gosh, yeah, so many. I mean, I've heard of people, being scared to have a shower that's too hot in case they get mastitis.
Oh, oh
Which
gosh,
I'm
I
like,
wouldn't have
"That's so
survived.
heavy." No, me neither. And it's like, I think that's one of the things where I'm like, I feel like I see how that misconception, I see where that came from, because maybe they've been told like, oh, if you have lots of engorgement, don't go and stand under a hot shower for ages and ages and ages because you're going to kind of stimulate the breast tissue. And then like,
Mm.
so I'm like, maybe that's where that came from. But having a shower is okay. Like you can have a
Yeah,
shower and it can be
you
warm.
enjoy your
Like, I
shower.
don't know if you want to, yeah, yeah.
If you leak, you
I
leak.
don't know if you
I
want to
think
talk
it's
about that
hard.
one.
Like, yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, heat can stimulate your breasts, and obviously it can cause swelling too. So if we've got swelling and we're trying to reduce that swelling, we're going to use ice on that. Ice directly to the skin because you don't want to get freezer burn, but the cold, just like as if you've twisted your ankle and it's swollen, the anti-inflammatory medications like Nurofen or Voltaren, if you're allowed to have them according to the box, and ice will help to reduce the swelling. And when we reduce the swelling around the ducts and the exit at the nipple, that can let the milk flow. when everything's super swollen and tight, it can really kind of impede how the milk flows out of the breast. So reducing the swelling can be helpful. But then again, if we're expressing or, we want to get the milk flowing, that warmth can be helpful to, to stimulate the letdown too. So it's just
Yeah.
about seeing what works for you. I think I have a big thing about marketers. I love marketers. Some of my best friends work in marketing, but I think people will take bits and pieces and come up with a device or a product that you have to have for breastfeeding.
Oh,
And
yeah.
one of those things I get really cautious about is massage of the breast. Our lactating breast is like the most beautiful, fragile, like incredible ecosystem in there. And if we've got lumpy breasts, it makes sense that when we've got a lump in our leg or our back or our shoulder, we get our thumb right in there, our knuckles, and like give it a good rub. And generally that really intense kind of massage helps dissipate the muscle tension. That is not the same with your breast. If you are aggressive with the massage in your breast, you can cause trauma. That trauma can lead to mastitis and inflammation, which will be pain and swelling and fevers and, real, like a lot of discomfort in the breast. So my kind of guide when people are like massaging their breast, and that might be during a feed, that might be before expressing, is really not to kind of rub at your breast any harder than you would massage directly under your eyes. So, like,
I love that.
if you press too hard under your eyes, like it's quite sore. So we tend to go gently there.
Yeah.
That or once you've had the baby, no firmer than you'd massage the baby's tummy. And we can kind of get a guide on that too, because we go gently with our babies. Because I
Yeah.
think when we go aggressive, digging things in, it can actually make the problem worse. So I think just like
Yeah.
go easy, go gently. Even antenatally, don't go too crazy on digging into the breast with your hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on the haka? Because I feel like that's a big one that people don't realize that it's a pump really, and they like suction that thing on, and they
Mm.
do it, I guess, with the intention of like just collecting extra milk, but really like you're stimulating a letdown,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
hard. They can be great and they can cause
yeah,
trouble at the same time. So,
yeah, yeah,
the haka actively removes milk, but not as intensely as an electric breast pump. So,
yeah,
an electric pump will cycle through where it suctions and decreases the amount of suction and then increases the suction again, and that stimulates your milk to keep flowing. The haka keeps a consistent suction on, so it will remove milk. It's not just catching what's dropping down, it will actively draw on the milk. If you've got an oversupply, great, that will remove some of it. You can store it, you can have it in the freezer, you can donate it, do whatever you want with it.
yeah,
But you're gonna stimulate yourself to continue to make that milk. So you're gonna continue the oversupply because you're actively removing the milk. And that's,
yeah,
once we switch from the endocrine system where our hormones are controlling our supply, we're going to move into the autocrine system where what we remove is what we replace. And so the
yeah,
more we take out, the more we kind of make. But I also think that sometimes babies do need to feed from both breasts. They need the
yeah,
volume from both breasts. And so if we're feeding from one and think we're just catching the letdown from the other side, but in fact we're withdrawing some of the milk and then the baby's not drinking it, sometimes they're not quite getting enough unless you're willing
yeah,
to put that in a bottle and then give it to the baby in a bottle. In which case you're creating more work for yourself because you have to wash the bottle and the haka when you could just put the baby directly on the other breast. But if
yeah,
mixed feeding is important to you in the long run and you want your baby to be able to take a bottle, that can be a way of kind of practicing it too. So anyone who's using a haka pump, so not the ladybugs are just milk collection shells. There's no vacuum or suction on them. I'm all for them. Catch that
yeah,
letdown, girlfriend, store it in the freezer, have it there. If you're
yeah,
using the haka, if you search on like YouTube how to apply a haka pump, they've actually got a really short, good video on how to use it properly because I see a lot of people hold it in place and just squeeze it, and it's really painful if you do that. So
yeah,
people who want to use it, like make sure you're using it properly and just be aware that, sometimes babies will be hungrier because you're not giving them all the milk they want, or we might be kind of triggering that oversupply if we've got one.
Oh, such good advice. So good. Do you have any little, like, parting wisdom, parting advice? Like, if you had to leave all the listeners with one thing that you're like, "This is my thing," if you take one thing from this, what would you say?
Just trust your gut. Trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. Like your instinct is so powerful as a mother, as a woman, as a human. Like just really go with it. And lean on the people around you. Find the right team. Find these people before you have your baby and plan for postpartum. Like
Yeah,
I love a good birth plan. I love them. But really, a lot of us put so much time and effort into our birth plan and we don't plan for postpartum. You
yeah,
need to think you and your partner are going to be at the extremes of fatigue. There's going to be pain or discomfort. There's going to be physical things. Gosh, some babies will need like lots of intensive help. We might have babies in special care nursery. We might just have babies who are simply on feeding plans. Heck, we can have a normal baby that's only feeding 8 times a day, and it is still hard work. You will
yeah.
have 3 or 4 times the washing that you normally have. You will be hungry like there is no tomorrow. You
Yes.
will feel you're gonna feel all the feels, and you need to plan for what that looks like. What meals are we going to have stored in the freezer so we can still be nourished? What are we going to do sleep wise? Because both of us need to sleep. How are we going to tag? Who can we lean on that can come and stay like who'll hang out at our house from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. that we really trust that will just sit and snuggle our baby so both of us can get some sleep. Like, how are we going to tap out? What's our mental health like support looking like? How do we know we're going to need help? And like what kind of look around you and have a list of resources for lactation consultants that you think you'd vibe with, physiotherapists that do, mums and babies, what kind of mental health support services are around? Do you know about Gidget? Do you know about Panda? Like knowing what's there and having it down on paper like a birth plan can be such an
Yeah,
incredible tool to use for after that baby's born. I don't know anyone that
100%.
regrets having a postnatal plan. Like,
Yep,
I don't know anyone. And yeah, you can go and say, like, I want my birth plan to be flexible. You're all these plans, it's looking at resources and the what ifs. Like, what if we're, hitting the extremes of fatigue and falling asleep on a couch with our baby? Like, what are we gonna do? Who are we gonna
yeah,
call on? Like, how can we outsource? Who can we get help from?
yeah,
And I
it's
think when you're
massive.
Yeah, and I think just recognizing when you have that conversation with a partner and recognizing that it's not just the birthing person's responsibility to care for the baby,
Yeah,
that it takes a tribe, then I think when the other person can see their role in this, that they're not useless just because they don't have lactating breasts, that
yeah.
they're really valuable and that there's a lot of stuff, a lot of time you know, that it takes to look after a baby, then I think we can come out of it in better shape.
It's huge. I always do a lot of postpartum planning with my clients, and I think they are often surprised at how much I emphasize it. And they're like, "Oh, we thought we had you for the birth." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you did, but also
Yeah.
there is life after birth. There is
Totally, it
life
doesn't
after
stop
birth."
there. Like, I'll get you to to game day, but then afterwards, we've gotta have a solid recovery. Like, we really
There's no
do,
point
because
having a beautiful birth if you're gonna just fall apart afterwards. Like, we want you to have a great birth and a great postpartum. They go together.
yeah, we want you to, like, step into motherhood and thrive. And even
Yes.
if we've had, like, women who had these most, like, insane, gorgeous births, whatever it is that they wanted, you can have a 3-hour labor and a lovely water birth and walk out of the hospital 4 hours later. And then
Yeah.
if you feel like a hero and you feel great and I feel strong because I've done this, and then 4 days later, I'm walking 1.5 Ks to the coffee shop and, like, I'm doing all the socializing and stuff, you will quickly burn down,
Yeah.
and you will quickly, like, end up feeling run down and end up with mastitis or supply issues and stuff like that because 'cause we're not taking the time to just pause and respect what's just happened to our body and recuperate and like really nourish ourselves and our baby so that that kind of helps us to thrive for the next 12 months, not just for the next 1 month or 2 months. Like it's really impactful for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
That and
I
get a lactation
completely agree.
consultant. That's good advice too, right?
100%, 100%. You need a lactation consultant.
Yeah,
Honestly,
totes.
it's true.
We've got some really amazing ones on the northern beaches too. So, like reach out to people like Angie who know these people, or reach out to me, like reach out on socials to other people. If you've got an obstetrician, ask if there's someone that they work with, or, I get lots of referrals from our home birth midwives too, and they're like the most incredible human beings. So like experience with all of this stuff, but still will recognize that sometimes people need something a little bit more, and they'll have a select group of people who they trust, who they've worked with, who they'll lean on. So like ask around, ask your friends if
Yeah.
they've used someone that they really liked, or perhaps they didn't, like do a little
And
bit of
yeah, and if
research
they
and kind
didn't,
of,
they probably regret that if they didn't.
yeah, yeah,
But it's so
yeah.
cool what you mentioned about, like, the midwives who are so experienced, they know their stuff, and even they are like, "You know what? You need a lactation consultant." Like, it's so beautiful when people are, um, just in their lanes, and then that just makes for a really great team, you know? Like,
Mm,
as a doula, I'm never gonna try and, like, step into the midwife's lane, or I'm never gonna try and step into the lactation consultant's lane. Like, when we all come together as a team, women are so well supported, you know? It's
beautiful
amazing.
things
It's a
happen.
recipe for success.
We can't do it all. There's not one healthcare worker that can do all of the things. So when we
Yeah.
come together and we work in unison, it is like magic to see it
Yeah.
happen. It's just beautiful. So I love being able to support women and, to be that second opinion if that's what they need, or to say, this is beyond what I need. I need to send you for a referral to a speech path, or, physiotherapist or a pediatrician. Like we need to get some more investigations done here. But I think that comes from confidence and education in skills, and saying, I've brainstormed everything we can lactation wise here. We need some more like investigating here.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's the point of it all. We all work together and realize what our strengths are.
100%. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a rating or a comment, and I can't wait to see you back here for the next one.